The old Victorian house on Maple Street had always felt wrong to Sarah Chen. Even when she first toured it with her real estate agent 6 months ago, something about the creaking floors and shadows that seemed too dark for afternoon sunlight made her skin crawl. But with her recent divorce and limited budget, the 3-bedroom home was all she could afford for herself and her 8-year-old daughter, Emma. Sarah worked as a night shift nurse at County General Hospital, which meant leaving Emma alone several evenings a week. Her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, would check on Emma before bedtime, but Sarah still worried constantly. The neighborhood had seen better days, and recent break-ins had everyone on edge. It started with small things that Sarah initially dismissed. Emma complained about hearing footsteps in the walls at night. Sarah explained it was probably mice or the old house settling. When Emma's toys went missing and reappeared in different rooms, Sarah assumed her daughter was just being forgetful. Even when Emma insisted someone was watching her through the heating vents, Sarah attributed it to an overactive imagination fueled by too many scary movies. The first real sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in October. Sarah had just returned from her shift at 7 a.m., exhausted and ready for sleep. Emma was getting ready for school, chattering about her upcoming Halloween costume. As Sarah headed upstairs to her bedroom, she noticed muddy footprints on the hardwood floor near the basement door. The prints were too large to be Emma's and too small to be Sarah's own. Sarah's heart began racing as she followed the trail. The footprints led to the basement stairs, then disappeared. She grabbed a flashlight and slowly descended into the musty darkness below. The basement was cluttered with boxes from their recent move, old furniture left by previous owners, and a furnace that rumbled constantly. Sarah searched every corner but found nothing unusual. When she questioned Emma about the footprints, her daughter's face went pale. Emma admitted she had been hearing more than just footsteps lately. She described hearing whispers coming from beneath the floorboards in her bedroom, always late at night when Sarah was at work. The whispers were too quiet to understand, but they seemed to know Emma's name. Sarah tried to remain rational. Old houses made strange noises. Pipes creaked. Wood expanded and contracted, and imagination could turn innocent sounds into something sinister. But deep down, maternal instinct told her something was terribly wrong. Over the next few weeks, the incidents escalated. Sarah would come home to find doors she remembered closing standing wide open. The thermostat would be adjusted to uncomfortable temperatures. Food disappeared from the refrigerator faster than she and Emma could consume it. Most disturbing of all, Sarah began finding evidence that someone had been in Emma's room while they were both away. Emma's dresser drawers would be slightly open when Sarah was certain they had been closed. The child's bed would be unmade despite Sarah making it every morning. One evening, Sarah discovered Emma's favorite stuffed animal, a brown teddy bear named Mr. Buttons, positioned in different spots around the room as if someone had been playing with it. The breaking point came on a cold November night when Sarah was scheduled to work a double shift at the hospital. Mrs. Rodriguez had agreed to stay overnight with Emma, but at the last minute her grandson became sick and she had to cancel. Sarah called in sick to work, something she had never done unless genuinely ill. That night, Sarah decided to stay awake and listen. She tucked Emma into bed as usual, read her a story, and kissed her goodnight. Then Sarah positioned herself in the hallway outside Emma's room with a baseball bat and her cell phone ready to call 911. Around midnight, Sarah heard it, a soft scraping sound coming from directly beneath Emma's bedroom floor. It was rhythmic and deliberate, like someone slowly dragging something heavy across wooden planks. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she realized the sound was moving from one side of Emma's room to the other. The scraping stopped. Then came the whispers Emma had described. They were too faint for Sarah to make out words, but the tone was unmistakably that of an adult male voice. Sarah could hear Emma stirring in her bed, whimpering softly in her sleep. Sarah crept downstairs to the basement, baseball bat raised and ready. She examined the ceiling directly below Emma's room, shining her flashlight along every beam and board. That's when she noticed something that made her stomach drop. Several of the floorboard nails had been worked loose. Fresh wood shavings littered the concrete floor below. Someone had been accessing the space between the basement ceiling and the first floor rooms. Someone had been living in the walls of their home. Sarah's hands shook as she called 911. The dispatcher told her to leave the house immediately and wait for police outside. Sarah ran upstairs, scooped Emma from her bed, and carried her sleeping daughter to the car. They spent the rest of the night at a nearby hotel while police searched the house. What officers found in the hidden space beneath the floorboards was every mother's worst nightmare. Someone had created a makeshift living area in the crawl space between floors. There were blankets, food supplies, empty water bottles, and dozens of photographs. Photographs of Emma playing in the yard, sleeping in her bed, getting ready for school. Photographs taken from impossible angles that could only have been captured by someone hiding inside their home. But most chilling of all were the detailed handwritten notes. Page after page describing Emma's daily routines, her favorite foods, the clothes she wore to school, and her conversations with friends. The unknown intruder had been studying Emma like a scientist observing a specimen, documenting her every move and habit. The police dusted for fingerprints and collected evidence, but the intruder had been careful. No clear prints were found, and the handwriting analysis would take weeks. Detective Martinez, assigned to the case, told Sarah that this appeared to be the work of someone with experience. The hidden living space showed signs of careful planning and patience. Sarah and Emma couldn't return to the house. The very thought of sleeping in those rooms, knowing someone had been watching them for months, was unbearable. They stayed in a series of hotels and temporary rentals while police continued their investigation. Emma had nightmares every night, waking up screaming about voices in the walls. 3 weeks later, Detective Martinez called with devastating news. Despite extensive investigation, they had no solid leads on the intruder's identity. The case was being classified as an active investigation, but without more evidence, there was little more they could do. The detective advised Sarah to consider moving to a different city entirely. Sarah felt trapped and helpless. She couldn't afford to simply abandon the house and start over somewhere new. Her job at County General was her only source of income, and breaking the lease would result in financial penalties she couldn't afford. But returning to Maple Street felt impossible. It was during this desperate time that Sarah first heard about Marcus Johnson. Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned him during one of their phone conversations. Marcus was a former Marine who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before returning home to work in private security. More importantly, he had a reputation for helping families in situations exactly like Sarah's. Marcus specialized in cases where traditional law enforcement had reached dead ends. He used military tactics and surveillance techniques to track down stalkers, home invaders, and other predators who terrorized families. His methods weren't always conventional, but his success rate was remarkable. Sarah was hesitant to contact Marcus at first. Hiring private security seemed like something wealthy people did in movies, not something a single mother nurse could afford. But Mrs. Rodriguez assured her that Marcus often worked pro bono for families in genuine need, especially when children were involved. The phone call that would change everything happened on a grey December morning. Sarah finally worked up the courage to dial Marcus's number, expecting to be told his services were too expensive or that her case wasn't worth his time. Instead, Marcus listened intently to every detail of her story without interruption. Finally, he spoke in a calm, measured voice that immediately made Sarah feel safer. Marcus told her he had dealt with similar cases before, and that whoever was stalking her family was likely still in the area, possibly watching her even now. He explained that these types of predators rarely simply disappeared after being discovered. Instead, they usually escalated their behavior, becoming more dangerous and unpredictable. Marcus agreed to take Sarah's case without payment up front. He would handle the situation his own way, using methods that went beyond what police could legally do. All he asked was that Sarah trust him completely and follow his instructions without question, no matter how strange they might seem. Sarah agreed immediately. She was desperate for someone to help protect Emma, and Marcus's confidence gave her the first hope she had felt in weeks. They arranged to meet the following day to discuss strategy and begin what Marcus called the hunt. Sarah had no way of knowing that accepting Marcus's help would lead to the most terrifying and ultimately triumphant week of her life. The man who had been terrorizing her family was about to discover that some warriors never truly leave the battlefield, and that threatening a child was the worst mistake he could possibly make. Marcus Johnson arrived at the coffee shop where he had agreed to meet Sarah exactly on time. She recognized him immediately from Mrs. Rodriguez's description. Tall and lean, with graying hair at his temples, wearing simple jeans and a dark jacket that somehow made him look both approachable and formidable. His handshake was firm but gentle, and his brown eyes held a steadiness that made Sarah feel protected for the first time in months. Marcus listened as Sarah repeated her story, asking detailed questions about the timeline, the intruder's behavior patterns, and the police investigation. He took notes in a small leather notebook, his handwriting neat and precise. When Sarah showed him photos of the hidden living space that police had documented, Marcus studied them intently. "This person has done this before," Marcus said finally. "The setup is too sophisticated for a first-timer. He knew exactly how to access your home's structure without being detected. He's patient, organized, and unfortunately, very experienced." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What does that mean for Emma and me?" Marcus met her eyes directly. "It means he's not going to give up easily. Men like this become obsessed. In his mind, you and Emma belong to him now. The fact that he was discovered and forced to abandon his hiding place will make him angry, but it won't make him disappear. The police said there weren't any leads." "Police have to follow rules and procedures," Marcus explained. "I don't. I've tracked men like this through Afghan mountains and Iraqi cities. Tracking one predator through suburban neighborhoods is something I can handle." Marcus outlined his plan. First, he would conduct surveillance of Sarah's house on Maple Street to determine if the intruder was still monitoring the property. Many stalkers continued watching their targets even after being discovered, waiting for an opportunity to resume contact. Second, Marcus would research similar cases in the surrounding area to see if there was a pattern that might identify their perpetrator. Most importantly, Marcus explained that Sarah and Emma would serve as bait to draw the stalker out into the open. Sarah immediately objected, but Marcus assured her that Emma would be protected at all times. The plan required the stalker to believe Sarah was vulnerable and isolated, which would encourage him to make a move. "I know it sounds dangerous," Marcus said, "but right now he has all the advantages. He knows where you live, where you work, and your daily routines. He can watch you whenever he wants while staying hidden." "We need to flip the script and put him in a position where we're watching him," Sarah agreed reluctantly. She was terrified of putting Emma at risk. But living in constant fear wasn't really living at all. At least with Marcus's plan, they were taking action instead of simply waiting for the next terrifying incident. The first step was moving back into the Maple Street house. Police had completed their investigation, and the hidden living space had been sealed off. Marcus installed additional security cameras and motion sensors throughout the property, hidden so well that Sarah couldn't spot them even when he showed her their locations. Marcus also provided Sarah with a panic button that would immediately alert him to any emergency. He positioned himself in a rented apartment across the street, with a clear view of Sarah's house, using military-grade surveillance equipment to monitor every entrance and window. For the first 3 days, nothing happened. Sarah went through her normal routines of taking Emma to school, running errands, and preparing for her return to work at the hospital. Emma seemed happier knowing that Marcus was watching over them, though she still had trouble sleeping. On the fourth night, Marcus detected movement. It was 2:47 a.m. when motion sensors in Sarah's backyard triggered an alert on Marcus's laptop. Through his night vision scope, he watched a figure dressed in dark clothing approach the house from the wooded area behind the property. The person moved with practiced stealth, staying low and avoiding the illuminated areas around the house. Marcus spoke quietly into his radio headset to Sarah, who was awake and waiting upstairs with Emma. "He's here. Stay exactly where you are and don't make any noise. This is going to be over soon." The intruder spent several minutes examining the basement windows that had previously provided access to the hidden living space. Finding them secured with new locks and sensors, he moved to the front of the house. Marcus watched through his scope as the man tried each ground floor window, testing for unlocked entries. Finally, the stalker produced a set of lock-picking tools and began working on the front door. Marcus had been counting on this moment. The new locks Marcus had installed were designed to be picked, that they would trigger silent alarms the moment they were tampered with. Marcus moved swiftly but silently from his surveillance position, crossing the street and approaching Sarah's house from the side. Years of military training had taught him how to move without making sound, even on dry autumn leaves. He positioned himself near the front door just as the stalker managed to open the lock. The man who entered Sarah's house was approximately 40 years old, with thinning brown hair and average build. He wore latex gloves and carried a small backpack filled with what appeared to be more camera equipment and restraints. Marcus recognized the type immediately, a predator who had been perfecting his methods for years, probably with multiple victims. Marcus allowed the intruder to enter the house completely before making his move. The stalker headed directly for the staircase leading to the bedrooms, confirming Marcus's suspicion that Emma was the primary target. Marcus followed silently, staying far enough behind to avoid detection. When the intruder reached the top of the stairs and began approaching Emma's bedroom door, Marcus struck. Years of combat experience had taught him how to subdue enemies quickly and quietly. The stalker found himself on the floor, with Marcus's knee pressed against his spine and his arms twisted behind his back, before he could make a sound. "If you struggle, I'll break your arm," Marcus whispered. "If you scream, I'll break your jaw. You're going to answer my questions, and then we're going to have a conversation about your future." The man tried to speak, but Marcus applied more pressure to keep him quiet. "Not yet. First, I'm going to search your backpack and see what you brought for Emma tonight." The contents of the backpack were even more disturbing than Marcus had expected. Along with additional camera equipment, the stalker had brought zip ties, duct tape, and a syringe filled with what appeared to be a sedative. There was also a handwritten note addressed to Emma, describing in graphic detail what the man planned to do to her. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, but years of military discipline kept his actions controlled and precise. He secured the stalker with the man's own zip ties and duct tape before calling Detective Martinez. "This is Marcus Johnson. I'm at 1247 Maple Street with Sarah Chen's stalker in custody. You need to get here immediately, and you need to bring backup." While waiting for police to arrive, Marcus questioned the stalker. The man's name was David Crane, and he was a registered sex offender who had been released from prison 18 months earlier after serving time for similar crimes in another state. David had been watching Sarah and Emma for over 4 months, learning their routines and planning his attack. Most disturbing of all, David revealed that Emma was not his first victim. He had successfully abducted and assaulted 3 other children over the past year, always using the same method of hiding in their homes for weeks or months before making his move. None of those crimes had been connected because David was careful to target families in different states and jurisdictions. When police arrived and arrested David, they found enough evidence in his apartment to link him to multiple unsolved cases across the region. The photographs, detailed notes, and other evidence would ensure that David would never be released from prison again. But for Marcus, the case wasn't completely closed yet. David had been working alone, but his methods suggested he had learned from someone else. During his confession, David mentioned meeting other predators online who shared techniques and target information. Marcus spent the next 2 days working with FBI agents to trace David's online connections. What they discovered was a network of predators who had been sharing information about potential victims, including detailed plans for home invasion and child abduction. The investigation that began with Sarah's case ultimately led to the arrest of 12 additional suspects across 6 states. Law enforcement officials credited Marcus's unconventional methods with breaking open what they described as one of the most sophisticated predator networks they had ever encountered. For Sarah and Emma, the nightmare was finally over. David Crane was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole, and the other members of the network received lengthy sentences. A house on Maple Street was sold, and Sarah used the money to move Emma to a safer neighborhood closer to her family. But the experience had changed both Sarah and Emma in ways that would take time to heal. Emma continued having nightmares for months, and Sarah struggled with feelings of guilt and paranoia. The knowledge that a stranger had been living in their home, watching Emma sleep and documenting her every move, was traumatic in ways that couldn't be easily overcome. Marcus stayed in contact with Sarah and Emma during their recovery, checking in regularly and providing referrals for counselors who specialized in helping families recover from stalking incidents. His own experience with post-combat trauma helped him understand what Sarah and Emma were going through. 6 months after David's arrest, Sarah invited Marcus to Emma's 9th birthday party. It was the first time Emma had wanted to celebrate her birthday since the ordeal, and Sarah saw it as a sign that her daughter was beginning to heal. Marcus brought Emma a special gift, a small whistle attached to a keychain, along with a promise that if she ever felt unsafe again, she could call him anytime. During the party, Sarah pulled Marcus aside to thank him properly for saving their lives. She knew that without his intervention, the story would have ended very differently. Emma might have been abducted, assaulted, or worse. "You gave us our lives back," Sarah told him. "I don't know how to repay that." Marcus smiled, watching Emma laugh with her friends. "Seeing her happy again is payment enough. That's why I do this work." As the party wound down and guests began leaving, Marcus prepared to say goodbye. His work with Sarah and Emma was finished, and he had other cases waiting for his attention. Other families needed his help, and other predators needed to be stopped. But before leaving, Marcus had one final conversation with Sarah about staying safe in the future. He taught her warning signs to watch for, security measures to maintain, and most importantly, how to trust her instincts if something ever felt wrong again. "You did everything right," Marcus assured her. "You listened to Emma when she said something was wrong. You called for help when you found evidence, and you were brave enough to take action when action was needed. Emma is lucky to have a mother like you." As Marcus drove away from the birthday party, he reflected on the case that had consumed several weeks of his life. David Crane and his network of predators were now behind bars, and several children were safe who might otherwise have become victims. For Marcus, this was what made all the dangerous, difficult work worthwhile. Every successful case meant another family could sleep peacefully at night, knowing that the monsters who had been lurking in the shadows were no longer a threat. The house on Maple Street was eventually sold to a new family who were unaware of its dark history. The hidden space beneath the floorboards was permanently sealed, and the rooms where David had lurked were renovated completely. But sometimes, late at night when the old house creaked and settled, the new owners would pause and listen, wondering if the sounds they heard were just the natural noises of an aging structure or something more sinister. They never knew how close they had come to living their own nightmare, or how fortunate they were that Marcus Johnson had been there to ensure their predecessor's story had a happy ending. 2 years after the nightmare on Maple Street ended, Sarah Chen stood in the kitchen of her new home, preparing breakfast for Emma, while sunlight streamed through windows that no longer held any fear. The cozy 2-bedroom apartment was in a secure building with controlled access, located in a neighborhood where children played freely in well-maintained parks and families knew their neighbors by name. Emma, now 10 years old, had grown taller and more confident. The shy, frightened girl who once whispered about voices in the walls had blossomed into an outgoing child who excelled in school and made friends easily. She still saw a counselor once a month, but the nightmares had largely stopped, replaced by dreams of becoming a police officer like the detectives who had helped catch David Crane. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. Those first few months after David's arrest had been filled with setbacks and small victories. Emma would sometimes freeze when she heard unexpected noises, and Sarah would catch herself checking locks multiple times before bed. Both mother and daughter had needed professional help to process the trauma and learn healthy coping mechanisms. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the trauma counselor Marcus had recommended, worked with Sarah and Emma both individually and together. Through play therapy, Emma learned to express her fears and anxiety in healthy ways. Sarah attended support groups for parents whose children had been targeted by predators, finding strength in shared experiences and mutual understanding. The legal proceedings had been lengthy, but ultimately satisfying. David Crane's trial received significant media attention, particularly when the full scope of his predator network was revealed. Sarah had been required to testify about finding the hidden living space and the impact on her family. Standing in that courtroom, facing the man who had terrorized them, had been one of the most difficult things Sarah ever did, but seeing David sentenced to life without parole had provided closure that allowed both Sarah and Emma to truly begin healing. The judge's words during sentencing stayed with Sarah. "Mr. Crane, your actions represent every parent's worst nightmare. You violated not just the physical safety of your victims, but their sense of security in their own homes. This court ensures you will never have the opportunity to harm another child." During the investigation and trial, Sarah had learned disturbing details about David's criminal history. He had been molesting children for over 15 years, using increasingly sophisticated methods to avoid detection. The hidden living spaces, detailed surveillance, and patient observation patterns had been perfected through multiple victims across several states. The FBI's investigation into David's online network had been even more extensive than Sarah initially realized. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, who had led the federal investigation, later told Sarah that David's arrest had been the key to dismantling what investigators called one of the most organized predator networks in recent history. The network had included not just active perpetrators like David, but also individuals who provided technical support, shared surveillance techniques, and even helped identify potential victims through social media monitoring. When the full scope was revealed, 27 people in 8 states faced federal charges ranging from conspiracy to child exploitation. Marcus had been instrumental in the broader investigation as well. His military experience with intelligence gathering and surveillance had provided law enforcement with insights they couldn't have developed on their own. The FBI eventually offered Marcus a consulting position, which he accepted while continuing to take private cases involving child safety. Throughout the legal proceedings and recovery process, Marcus had remained a constant presence in Sarah and Emma's lives. He attended Emma's school performances and soccer games, helped Sarah navigate the complexities of victim assistance programs, and provided security assessments for their new living arrangements. What started as a professional relationship had evolved into something deeper. Marcus had never married or had children of his own, pouring his protective instincts into his work instead. Sarah and Emma filled a void in his life that he hadn't fully recognized until they entered it. For Sarah, Marcus represented safety and stability in ways that went beyond physical protection. His calm presence during crisis situations, his unwavering reliability, and his genuine care for Emma's well-being had made him an irreplaceable part of their family structure. The relationship developed slowly and carefully. Both Sarah and Marcus were mindful of Emma's emotional state and the importance of maintaining stability during her healing process. They spent time together as a family unit first, building trust and comfort before acknowledging their growing romantic feelings. Emma had been the first to suggest that Marcus should officially join their family. During one of her counseling sessions, she told Dr. Hernandez that she wished Marcus could be her dad because he made both her and her mum feel safe and happy. When Dr. Hernandez shared this insight with Sarah, it opened conversations that had been brewing beneath the surface for months. Marcus proposed to Sarah on the second anniversary of David's arrest, choosing the date deliberately to mark their transition from victims to survivors to a thriving family. The proposal took place in their new apartment, with Emma helping to plan the surprise and presenting Sarah with a second ring, a promise ring from daughter to mother that they would always take care of each other. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the garden of Mrs. Rodriguez, who had become like a grandmother to Emma. Detective Martinez attended, along with Dr. Hernandez and several of the support group members who had become close friends during Sarah's recovery. Special Agent Walsh sent congratulations from Washington, where she continued working on cases involving child exploitation networks. Emma served as both flower girl and ring bearer, wearing a dress she had chosen herself and carrying a bouquet of sunflowers because they represented strength and happiness. During the ceremony, Marcus made vows not just to Sarah but to Emma as well, promising to protect and support both of them for the rest of his life. The adoption papers for Emma were filed immediately after the wedding. Marcus legally became Emma's father, something all three of them had wanted since the early days of their relationship. Emma had specifically requested to hyphenate her last name, becoming Emma Chen Johnson to honor both her biological father's heritage and her new family structure. Their honeymoon was a family affair, a week in Disney World that was Emma's first truly carefree vacation since the ordeal began. Sarah watched her daughter run between attractions with pure joy, marveling at how far they had all come from those dark days when Emma was afraid to sleep in her own room. Marcus continued his private security work, but with modifications that allowed him to be more present for his new family. He took cases that didn't require extensive travel and maintained a strict policy of being available for Emma's important events. He also began teaching self-defense classes for children and families, using his experience to help others develop confidence and safety awareness. Sarah returned to nursing but switched from night shifts to days, taking a position in the pediatric ward where her experience with trauma made her particularly effective with young patients and their families. She often shared her story with other parents facing similar situations, providing hope and practical advice about recovery and healing. The house on Maple Street had eventually been sold to a young couple who were unaware of its history. Sarah sometimes drove past it on her way to visit Mrs. Rodriguez, noting the changes new owners had made. The basement had been completely renovated, the floorboards replaced, and a security system installed. Sarah felt a sense of peace, knowing that no future residents would face the terror she and Emma had experienced. Emma thrived in her new school and neighborhood. She joined the soccer team, learned to play piano, and developed a particular interest in criminal justice that clearly stemmed from her experience. During career days, she proudly introduced Marcus as her father and explained his work protecting families from dangerous people. The trauma counseling had evolved over time from crisis intervention to maintenance and growth. Emma still saw Dr. Hernandez monthly, but their sessions focused increasingly on building life skills, processing normal childhood challenges, and maintaining the emotional strength she had developed through overcoming her early trauma. For Emma's 11th birthday, Marcus arranged a special surprise. With the help of Detective Martinez and Special Agent Walsh, Emma got to tour the FBI field office and meet some of the agents who had worked on her case. She was particularly excited to see the evidence room where David's belongings were stored, though she was carefully shielded from anything that might be upsetting. During the FBI visit, Emma announced her intention to become either a police detective or FBI agent when she grew up. Agent Walsh encouraged her interest and explained the education and training required for law enforcement careers. Emma began reading voraciously about criminal justice and even started a safety club at her school to teach other children about personal protection. Sarah watched her daughter's transformation with amazement and pride. The frightened child who had once hidden under blankets from imaginary monsters had become a confident young person determined to protect others from real dangers. Emma's strength inspired other families in their support group, particularly children who were still struggling with recovery. Marcus found his work taking on new dimensions as well. Word of his success in Sarah's case had spread throughout law enforcement communities, leading to consulting opportunities with police departments and federal agencies. He developed training programs for investigators working child endangerment cases and created protocols for coordinating between private security and official law enforcement. The predator network that David had been part of was eventually dismantled completely, but Marcus knew that other networks would inevitably form. His work evolved to focus on prevention and education, as much as investigation and intervention. He spoke at conferences, trained law enforcement personnel, and worked with technology companies to identify online threats. 3 years after the wedding, Sarah and Marcus welcomed a new addition to their family. Sarah had initially been hesitant about having another child, worried about dividing her attention when Emma still needed so much support. But Emma had enthusiastically lobbied for a baby sibling, and Dr. Hernandez had helped Sarah work through her concerns. Baby Michael was born on a crisp autumn day, with Emma serving as his most devoted big sister. The experience of caring for an infant in a safe, stable environment helped Sarah process some of the helplessness she had felt during Emma's early childhood trauma. This time, she could provide protection from the very beginning. Emma took her big sister role seriously, helping with feedings and diaper changes, while regaling her baby brother with stories about their family's adventures. She was particularly careful about home security, always making sure doors were locked and windows secured before the baby's bedtime. The nursery was in the master bedroom, a decision that reflected the family's continued awareness of safety without letting fear dictate their choices. Marcus had installed state-of-the-art security systems throughout their home, but they were unobtrusive and designed to provide peace of mind rather than create a fortress mentality. As Michael grew from infant to toddler, Emma delighted in teaching him simple safety lessons. She showed him how to recognize trusted adults, what to do if he ever felt scared, and the importance of telling parents about anything unusual. The lessons were age-appropriate and positive, focused on empowerment rather than fear. By Emma's 13th birthday, the trauma that had once defined her life had become one part of a much larger story about resilience, family, and triumph over adversity. She was an honor roll student, team captain of her soccer team, and a mentor for younger children in her school's peer support program. The annual victim impact statements required during David Crane's periodic parole hearings had become opportunities for Emma to demonstrate her growth and strength. Her final statement, delivered when she was 14 years old, was a powerful testament to survival and healing. David Crane tried to steal my childhood and my sense of safety, but he failed. He thought hiding in our house would give him power over us, but instead it brought us together with people who helped us become stronger. I'm not afraid anymore because I know there are good people who will always protect children and families. I'm going to be one of those people when I grow up. Sarah often reflected on how different their lives might have been without Marcus's intervention. The statistics for children who are successfully abducted by long-term stalkers are sobering, and she knew how close they had come to becoming another tragic news story instead of a tale of recovery and hope. The support network that had formed around their family during the crisis had become a permanent part of their lives. Mrs. Rodriguez remained Emma's honorary grandmother, Detective Martinez stayed in touch with updates about related cases, and Dr. Hernandez became a family friend who attended birthday parties and school events. Marcus's work continued to evolve and expand. He established a non-profit organization focused on training families and communities to recognize and respond to predatory behavior. The Marcus Johnson Foundation provided free security assessments for vulnerable families and funded research into predator behavior patterns. Emma contributed to her stepfather's foundation by sharing her story at appropriate venues and helping develop educational materials for children. Her presentations to parent groups and school assemblies were always carefully supervised and age-appropriate, but they provided powerful testimony about resilience and recovery. The house that had once been their prison had truly become their starting point for a better life. Sarah often told Emma that their experience, terrible as it had been, had brought them Marcus and led to a stronger, safer, happier family than they might have had otherwise. As Emma prepared for high school and continued pursuing her interest in law enforcement, Sarah marveled at her daughter's transformation from victim to survivor to advocate. The little girl who had once whispered about voices in the walls now spoke confidently to audiences about overcoming fear and finding strength in family and community support. The legacy of those terrifying months on Maple Street wasn't trauma and fear, but rather love, resilience, and an unbreakable bond between a mother, daughter, and the warrior who had saved them both and become their hero in every sense of the word. Their story continued to inspire other families facing similar situations, proving that even in the darkest circumstances, hope and healing are possible with the right support and unwavering determination to not let evil triumph over good. Years later, when Emma graduated from the FBI Academy as Special Agent Emma Chen Johnson, Sarah and Marcus watched with tears of pride as their daughter raised her right hand and swore to protect and serve others the way Marcus had once protected and served their family. The circle was complete, but the story of strength, love, and justice would continue through Emma's work and the countless families she would help in the years to come.